Hey everyone, some books entertain you for a few hours, and some books emotionally stay with you long after you finish them. Myself You by Chayita Bhattacharyya is one of those books, and honestly, this book is not just a romance novel. It is emotional chaos, it's heartbreaking, it's insecurity, it's obsession, it's healing, and somewhere in the middle of all that madness, it becomes a story of self worth. When I started reading this book, I expected a simple emotional love story, but what I got instead was deeply dramatic, emotionally intense journey about toxic attachment, emotional dependency, trauma, and healing. The very first thing I noticed about myself view was the emotional intensity. Every conversation feels important, every misunderstanding feels huge, and every emotional reaction feels amplified. And honestly, sometimes the drama becomes so intense that you almost laugh. But then suddenly, the book hits you with a line that feels painfully real. This story constantly feels emotionally unstable, and I mean that in the best possible way. You always feel like something is about to break, someone is about to cry, or a relationship is about to collapse. Liva is honestly the emotional heart of this novel. She feels vulnerable, confused, emotionally dependent, and deeply human. At the beginning of the story, she constantly searches for emotional safety and validation, and I think many readers will connect with her because her emotions never feel fake. The strongest part of her character is her growth because this isn't a story where love magically fixes everything. Instead, we slowly watch her struggle, break emotionally, question herself, learn boundaries, heal, and finally choose herself. And honestly, that emotional growth becomes the best part of the book for me. Now, we need to talk about Ron. And honestly, this man is emotional destruction in human form. He is possessive, jealous, emotionally impulsive, sometimes caring, sometimes toxic, and constantly overwhelmed by his own emotion. There were moments where I genuinely felt bad for him, and then moments where I wanted to scream, "Bro, please go to therapy." But what makes her character interesting is that the book never fully excuses his behavior. The story clearly shows how emotional instability and insecurity can slowly damage love, and that realism made the relationship dynamics feel much stronger. One thing I genuinely appreciated about Myself You is that it doesn't romanticize emotional toxicity completely. The book explores emotional dependency, toxic attachment, insecurity, fear of abandonment, mental health, and self worth. And honestly, some parts felt very real. This isn't a perfect fairy tale romance. The relationships in this story are messy, emotionally exhaustive, and sometimes destructive. But that also why they feel believable. And slowly, this story starts asking a very important question. What happens when love starts destroying your peace? Now, let's talk honestly about the writing style. This book is very dramatic. Every emotion feels intense. Every internal monologue feels poetic. Every emotional scene feels like the world is ending. Sometimes characters speak like philosophers during relationship arguments. And yes, there are moments where emotional intensity becomes unintentionally funny. But somehow the writing still works because the emotions feel sincere. You can genuinely feel the emotional effort the author put into these characters. And then later in the story, Claire Kavansky becomes an important contrast because while most relationships in the book feel emotionally chaotic, Claire represents calmness, respect, patience, and emotional safety. And through the contrast, the story slowly shifts from the emotional destructions to healing. Now, honestly, this book definitely has flaws. Some scenes feel repetitive emotionally. The pacing becomes chaotic, and if you prefer subtle writing, this book may feel overwhelming because Myself You does not believe in emotional subtlety. This book screams every feeling directly into your soul. But despite all its chaos, this book stayed with me emotionally. Not because it was perfect, but because it felt emotionally honest. The biggest message this story gives is simple. Love should never cost your self-respect, and healing matters more than emotional suffering. I genuinely respect Chaita Bhattacharya ma'am for writing something this emotionally intense and raw because underneath all the drama, there is a very human story about pain, healing, and learning how to choose yourself again. So yes, if you enjoy emotionally intense romance stories with flawed characters, healing journeys, heartbreak, and psychological depth, I would definitely recommend this book, Myself You by Chaita Bhattacharya. Thank you.